From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. I've been dreading this day for a year. Because last year we didn't do a show on October 7th. It was a Saturday. But definitely October 7th will forever be marked in our minds as a day of tragedy going forward. I've got a lot to say about it. We're going to get to that later on in the show. I want to get the show kind of going on cyber. And then for those that want to stick around for the October 7th part, I'll be doing a few different things on it today, including a very detailed post on Substack, another very detailed post on my social media accounts where you can go and find all my thoughts about it. Then it's taken me the whole weekend to kind of put some stuff together. So with that being said, let's kick off the show this morning. I hope everyone had a relaxing weekend. It was great to be off on Thursday for Rosh Hashanah, for the Jewish New Year. We are in the 10 days of now forgiveness, 10 days of repentance, as it is customary in Jewish customs and Jewish holidays. On Friday, we mark Yom Kippur, our day of atonement, where we fast for over 25 hours. So obviously a lot of deep thinking going on in my brain this week. But without further ado, let's get going with the show. Join me for a coffee cup cheers, y'all. Coffee cup cheers. We'll start with the Wall Street Journal exclusive around what we reported on last week with Salt Typhoon targeting US ISPs. There's now more information becoming available of the attack that targeted Verizon Communications, AT&T, and Lumen Technologies. And they're just part of the names that were breached as part of a recently discovered intrusion. The widespread compromise is considered potentially catastrophic, carried out by a sophisticated Chinese hacking group called Salt Typhoon. It appeared geared towards intelligence collections. According to people familiar with the attack, both AT&T, Verizon, and Lumen did not comment to the Wall Street Journal about what's going on there. Now, while companies are technically required to give out a material breach, right? If you go through an incident, the SEC requires you to report a material breach. But there is an exception clause there. That exception clause is in national security matters, meaning the FBI or any federal agency can give you a pass from actually disclosing the contents of the breach or the material of the breach due to an ongoing investigation. But this is significant a month before the presidential election here. We're really seeing Chinese ramp up their cyber activity targeting critical and vulnerable U.S. networks. This one targeting telecommunication and broadband companies, where they intercepted electronic information. The attack, which was discovered in recent weeks, remains under active investigation by the U.S. government and the private sector security analysts. Investigators are working to understand just exactly what data was observed or exfiltrated in this attack. One person familiar with the attack said the U.S. government considered the intrusion to be historically significant and worrisome. Okay, history. OPM, historically significant and troublesome. Equifax, historically significant and troublesome. Marriott, historically significant and troublesome. And I can keep going. I can keep going by a death of 1,000 cuts by incapable individuals at leadership to do the very basic of defending this nation from threats coming on from China that have been essentially hard hitting in the U.S. Officials have been alarmed by efforts by Chinese intelligence officers to burrow into vulnerable U.S. critical infrastructure networks like water treatment facilities, power station, and airports. And again, if you're China and you think of your game plan, you go, we need to get a hold of Taiwan, because if we get a hold of Taiwan, we strangle the world diplomatically and militarily. Why? 90% of all semiconductors come out of Taiwan. It's going to take years to rebuild that supply chain up, no matter where you build it, right? I mean, even the first semiconductor plants in the US aren't scheduled to go online until 2026, 2027. So you have that control. You have that control. You have a diplomatic advantage, which can get you to create more concessions towards China. Um, and so that's one of the threats that exist there. Investigators believe that intruders may have gained access to Cisco system routers, although Cisco hasn't denied this, um, but has definitely said that they're working with investigators. In a statement from the Chinese embassy in Washington, China firmly opposes and combats cyber attacks and cyber theft in all forms, coming from the nation that's known for knockoffs. Uh huh. Uh huh. I mean, the Chinese must think we're stupid. Either that or we just have stupid leaders that can't hold them accountable, right? It's one of two things. Microsoft is investigating the new Salt Typhoon intrusion, including other cybersecurity companies there as well. It's believed that they targeted the federal wiretap system, by the way, in this attack, and that's really the big one. The federal wiretap system um, is warrant based. It's active federal investigations that are tapping through court orders specific communications of people suspected of potentially terrorism, cyber espionage, you name it. Um, and so if they did target that system, that's significant. That's like finding out everyone who's under investigation would get an email from the Chinese saying you're being wiretapped, and all those investigations would go down the drain, potentially costing hundreds of thousands of lives, or tens of thousands of lives, or even thousands of lives, or even one life. Is a world all within itself. We continue with state threat actors here as Microsoft and the DOJ joined forces to take down more than 100 domains linked to the Russian-sponsored group known as Star Blizzard. The APT, active since at least 2017, has constantly targeted journalists and NGOs, especially Russia experts, particularly into supporting the Ukraine. Today's seizure of 41 internet domains reflect the Justice Department's cyber strategy in action, using old tools to disrupt and deter malicious state-sponsored cyber actors. It's a good move, but they're going to get 41 others and they'll rebuild them, but that'll take some time, and that gives you more time to take them down. So there's that. This is part of attempting to defend and protect the elections that are coming up in just under 30 days here in the US, and it's crunch time, folks. So be mindful of some of the fake stuff that's going out there at this time. Comcast and Truist Bank are both disclosed that they were impacted by a data breach at FBCS. That's the Financial Business and Consumer Solutions, which is a debt collection agency that was breached earlier this year. The breach happened in February of this year, with threat actors breaching the network, stealing information like full name, social security numbers, dates of birth, account information, driver's license number, or ID cards. The data breach, believed to have impacted 1.9 million individuals, has now reached 4.2 million people as the internal investigation continues to tally more and more victims. According to a notice submitted to the Maine Attorney General, 273,703 Comcast customers were impacted by the breach there as well. And Truist Bank, for their end, had around the number here is undisclosed, but they've also had some of their customers breached there as well. We continue with Universal Music Group informing hundreds of individuals about a recent data breach impacting their personal information. According to the Maine Attorney General, the unauthorized activity was discovered in an internal application in early July. And so 680 individuals were impacted there. If you haven't subscribed to our Substack, please make sure to go do so right now. jamesazar.substack.com. I'll be dropping a whole lot of content there. So it's a great way for you to subscribe and get a whole lot more than cyber and deeper thoughts than what we do on the show, as well as real like hands-on. Like I have a whole episode, I have a whole series there on identity. I have a whole series there on data management and data security. So all that and more at jamesazar.substack.com. The financial impact of cyber attacks targeting a cyber physical system can reach up to $1 million as more and more critical infrastructure companies become victims of ransomware attacks, according to a survey by Clarity that surveyed 1,100 security professionals involved in OT, IoT, BMS, and IOMT interconnected medical devices. Around 45% of organizations suffered losses of $500,000 or more over the past year, with 27% disclosing losses of 1 million or more. More than half of the respondents were in the chemical manufacturing, power and energy, and mining and material sectors have reported losses greater than 500,000 caused by cyber incidents in the last 12 months. Clarity's latest global state of CPS report is attached in the show notes. Y'all can see that full report there, but absolutely breathtaking numbers there of what's going on in critical infrastructure. And again, the inability of the government to properly address cybercrime is absolutely astronomical. Just tells you everything you need to know about wanting to partner with government to deal with cybercrime. Just all you're doing is giving them information, and all they're doing is taking it, reporting it, but they're not really doing a lot of deterrence in that aspect that you would expect a government to be able to do. Identity and access management solution provider OCTA has resolved a vulnerability that would have allowed attackers to bypass the single sign-on policies and gain access to applications. The issue, OCTA says in a security advisory, was introduced on July 17th and only affected OCTA Classic users under certain conditions. On September 27th, the vulnerability was identified in a specific OCTA configuration whereby an attacker with valid credentials could bypass configured conditions within an application-specific sign-on policy. According to Okta, successful exploitation of the vulnerability required that an attacker would have a valid username and password pair, that application-specific sign-on policies were configured, and the use of a user agent evaluated as an unknown device type. So high complexity. A lot of stars have to align for this attack to take place, although Okta not wasting any time, urging everyone to patch these ASAP. In a surprising move, Russian federal police arrested nearly 100 suspects with alleged ties to the sanctioned Cryptex cryptocurrency exchange and other platforms used for illegal transactions after launching a rare investigation into domestic cyber criminal networks. Sergei Ivanov, an alleged founder of the crypto exchange described by Russian federal police as a key suspect in the Kremlin's investigation, was taken into custody along with at least 95 other individuals, according to the Russian Federation there. The announcement comes after the U.S. sanctioned Cryptex and Ivanov last week for allegedly laundering over $720 million in funds from Russian ransomware groups. And I see the remarks coming now. He probably didn't pay off the Russians. Probably. They may have not known how much money was there until the U.S. said it. And they found 720. We could probably find a whole lot more. Russia being under sanctions, looking for more financial strife, could have done this just for that purpose at all and not to address cybercrime there either. Recovery from ransomware attacks is taking longer. In fact, in some cases, more than a month, as attack increase against the healthcare industry. A survey published by SOFA says 2/3 of respondents were hit by ransomware in the past year, up from 60% in the previous year. Just 34% said they were hit by ransomware attack in the SOFA's 2021 report. Recovery times have also increased. Only 22% of victims fully recovered from the attack in less than a week, compared to 47% the year prior. Nearly 40% took more than a month to return to normal operations, and that just tells you everything you need to know. Recovery time, business continuity. As practitioners, our role is what's critical to the business. How do we recover? What's the fastest way to get the business running back up and online? And that's really, really important. And finally, Ann Neuberger has finally stood on her two back feet and said what should be said from the deputy cybersecurity SAR in the federal government. The idea that insurance companies allow and pay extortion payments done by ransomware is actually bad. In an opinion piece written in the Financial Times, Ann Neuberger, the U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technology, has warned that ransomware was wreaking havoc around the world, and insurance policies that companies are writing to cover reimbursement of ransomware payments incentivize payments of ransomware that fuel the cybercrime ecosystem in a troubling practice that must end. Fact checked. True. If insurance companies didn't cover ransomware payments, if they just covered a recovery and no payments, you'd see a whole lot less ransomware. The fact is, when CEOs and boards are given the option to pay a ransom and make it go away or recover, they'll often choose the first rather than the latter, right? that fuels them and it keeps them coming back. $75 million was the largest ransomware payment done in history, and that was this year. Change Healthcare, United Healthcare paid 22 million. I mean, those are life-changing numbers, right? As a friend of mine says, get $10 million, put it in the bank, invest it against the S&P 500 to make 5% a year, live off of $500,000 a year. You could good with that? Most people would be, especially if you live in Russia, China. You're a millionaire by their terms, making that kind of money, life-changing money. So there's that. That's it for our show this morning. Again, I'm going to talk about October 7th here for just a moment, because October 7th hit close to home for my family. I have family that are currently on the battlefield, have been on the battlefield for the last year, whether in Gaza or Lebanon. And I won't disclose their location for obvious reasons. And it's taken a toll on our family. It's taken a toll on us as a community. It's taken a toll on me personally. When you think of what October 7th did for anti-Semitism and the amount of anti-Semitism we see on college campuses, and while I'll say this, a lot of people get excited by what they see on social media. I don't. These keyboard warriors have no clue about life. The Queers for Palestine is probably the most oxymoron thing I've ever seen in my life. Every interview with Palestinians around gay rights or LGBTQ is met with the same disgust, with the same idea that those people in Palestine would be put to death, thrown off of buildings, carried around on the back of motorcycles alive, allowed to essentially road burn to death, beaten, murdered, their families ostracized. And yet these people have somehow found refuge in the Palestinian cause. A year of just my mind going numb from just seeing that. However, it's not just that. It's 1,200 victims that on the eve of October 6th went to sleep, were at a party, didn't know that the next morning they were going to be gunned down and killed in cold blood for no other reason than simply being Jews in the one and only Jewish state of Israel. Now, we've often fallen into the talking point here over the last year of occupier and occupied, occupier and victim. Well, the story of Israel is one that's far more complex than just a basic TikTok social media narrative that's kind of discerned out there, that's trying to bring a smaller, a more narrow, focused approach to what's going on in Israel. It's far from that. Israel has been the Jewish ancestral homeland for over 3,000 years. Our roots go back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Goes back with when Moses took the Israelites out of Egypt and brought them to that land, that promised land. Promised land was not occupied by Arabs. Arabs did not exist in that part of the world. Arabs made it to that part of the world with the rise of Islam. Rise of Islam was in the 1400s, 700 years ago. 3,000 years to 700 years. Historical facts. I know some people try to change those, but you can't change history. And when you change history, you're essentially going down a very slippery slope. So the history of Israel is one that goes back 3,000 years. It's one that, mind you, goes back to kingdoms and tribes, to the building of the first and the second temple and their destruction, to the exodus by the Romans of all Jews from the land of Judea and Samaria at the time, all over the globe, and then the returning of the Jews after the real genocide happened in 1945 during World War II, where 6 million Jews lost their lives in the Holocaust. So, there's significant history there of Jewish claim to that land, because it is. And so 1,200 innocent victims, 101 hostages still held in Gaza by Hamas, including 1-year-old and 5-year-old Ariel and Kfir Bibas, who the 1-year-old spent more time in captivity than alive and free, as when he was kidnapped, he was merely 6 months old or 7 months old at the time. So, all in all, October 7th is a day where we now see the triumph of the Jewish people. That over history, people have tried to rise up against the Jewish people and have failed miserably each and every time. But it doesn't come without a price to the Jewish people, whether it be in death or otherwise. But all in all, I'll have more thoughts on this later today. But please take a moment to actually study that history and understand it. I'll be posting more on it in my social media, so go check it out there. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, all, and most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.